Hey there. I hope you'll enjoy the new story. Subscribe and like the story. I always thought Elena and I had something unbreakable. We met in college, two kids with big dreams and endless optimism. She was the type of person who could light up any room, and I was just happy to be the one she came home to. Our life together felt like the picture-perfect story you'd see in a movie. A cozy home in a quiet neighborhood, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee, and a shared playlist for every road trip. But lately, something had shifted, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. It started small. The kind of changes you brush off because you want to believe everything's fine. Elena was coming home later than usual, claiming work was more demanding than ever. She'd throw her bag on the counter, give me a distracted kiss on the cheek, and head straight for the shower. At first, I didn't question it. She'd always been ambitious, and I admired that about her. But the excuses began piling up. Late meetings, weekend work trips, urgent client dinners. There was always a reason, and it was always plausible. Except it didn't feel plausible anymore. One night, I was sitting in the living room, flipping through channels without actually watching anything when Elena walked in. Her hair was damp, and her makeup was fresh, as though she'd just come from somewhere instead of the office. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She hesitated, just for a second, before nodding. "Yeah, exhausting. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane." Traffic. The same excuse she'd used the day before. And the day before that. I forced a smile. "Dinner's in the fridge if you're hungry." "Thanks, babe," she said, barely glancing at me before heading upstairs. I wanted to let it go, but something gnawed at the back of my mind. It wasn't just the late nights or the vague explanations. It was the way she avoided eye contact when I asked how her day had been, the way she kept her phone face down on the counter, and the way she seemed distant, like she was there, but not really there. The next morning, while Elena was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from a contact saved as work. I don't usually snoop. I'd always trusted Elena, but this time, I couldn't stop myself. The message preview read, "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again." My chest tightened. I wanted to believe it was innocent, some misunderstanding. Maybe work really was a colleague, and the message was about a successful project or event. But deep down, I knew better. My gut had been telling me something was off for weeks, and now I had proof, if only a sliver of it. Elena came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, and smiled when she saw me. "Morning," she said, her voice casual, as though nothing was wrong. "Morning," I replied, my heart pounding. I wanted to ask her about the text, but the words stuck in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if I was overthinking things? Instead, I got up, grabbed my coffee, and left the room. But that text lingered in my mind all day, replaying over and over like a broken record. That evening, Elena mentioned another late night at work. "It's just for a while," she said. "This project is huge, and I'm one of the leads. You understand, right?" "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. But inside, I felt like I was sinking. I hated the way I doubted her, hated the voice in my head whispering that something wasn't right. But the pieces didn't add up, and no matter how much I tried to push the thought away, it kept coming back. Later that week, I decided to talk to my friend Nathan about it. We were having drinks at our usual spot, a small bar with worn-out booze and a jukebox that played nothing but 80s rock. Nathan had been my best friend since high school, and he had a way of cutting through my overthinking. "So, what's up?" he asked, taking a sip of his beer. "You've been quiet all night." I hesitated, then blurted it out. "Do you think Elena could be hiding something?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Hiding what?" "I don't know. Something. Anything. She's been acting different lately. Distant." He frowned, setting his glass down. "You think she's cheating?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But there's this text I saw." Nathan leaned forward, his expression serious. "Look, man, I'm not saying you're wrong to feel suspicious, but you need to be sure before you accuse her of something like that. It could be nothing." "Yeah," I said, though the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. "Maybe." When I got home that night, Elena was already in bed, her back to me. I climbed in beside her, staring at the ceiling as the room filled with the sound of her even breathing. I wanted to believe Nathan was right, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Something was wrong, and I was going to find out what. The next day started like any other. Coffee brewing, sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows, and Elena rushing out the door with her usual, "Love you," tossed over her shoulder. I sat at the table, staring at the untouched toast on my plate, replaying everything from the night before. The text message, her evasive smiles, the way she'd been slipping away like water through my fingers. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening right under my nose. It was late afternoon when my phone buzzed. I was at work, distractedly sorting through emails when the notification lit up my screen. It was an unknown number. The message read, "You deserve to know the truth about Elena." I stared at the words, my heart racing. Attached was a video file. My first instinct was to delete it, to bury my suspicions and pretend this wasn't happening. But curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the better of me. With trembling hands, I clicked the file. The video was shaky, as if taken from a phone at a distance. It showed a dimly lit bar I didn't recognize, crowded with people chatting and laughing. At first, I couldn't make out anything significant, just a sea of strangers. Then the camera zoomed in. There she was, Elena, unmistakably her, sitting at a small table in the corner. She wasn't alone. Opposite her sat a man I'd never seen before. He leaned in close, his hand resting casually on her arm. They were laughing, sharing a moment that felt too intimate, too familiar. As the clip continued, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, and she didn't pull away. The video ended before I could see more, but the damage was done. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. My mind raced with questions. Who was this guy? How long had this been going on? Was it just a friendly gesture, or was there more to it? I didn't know what to think, but the image of Elena with him was burned into my brain. I texted the unknown number back. "Who are you? Why are you sending me this?" The reply came almost immediately. "A friend. You need to see what's really happening." My hands tightened around the phone. A friend? Whose friend? Mina? Elena's? Was this some kind of prank? Before I could ask more, another message came through. "There's more if you're ready to face it." I hesitated. Did I want to face it? Did I want to see more proof of something I was terrified might be true? After a moment, I typed back, "Send it." Another video appeared, shorter this time. It was from the same night, the same bar. Elena and the man were leaving together. He had his arm around her waist, guiding her through the crowd as they slipped out the door. My stomach turned. This wasn't just a casual drink between colleagues. This was something else entirely. By the time I got home that evening, I was a mess of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion. Elena wasn't home yet, so I paced the living room, the videos replaying in my mind. I couldn't sit still, couldn't think straight. When her car finally pulled into the driveway, my pulse quickened. "Hey," she said as she walked through the door, dropping her keys on the counter. "Sorry, it's been a crazy day." I studied her carefully, looking for any sign of guilt or remorse. But she looked as calm and composed as ever, like nothing had happened. "How was work?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "Busy," she replied, kicking off her shoes. "You know how it is?" I nodded slowly, watching her every move. "Did you go anywhere after?" She paused, just for a fraction of a second, before shaking her head. "No, just came straight home." The lie hit me like a slap. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't say anything. "Not yet. Dinner's in the fridge," I said, forcing a neutral tone. "Thanks, babe." She smiled, leaning in to kiss my cheek before heading upstairs. As soon as she was out of sight, I pulled out my phone and re-watched the videos. The man's face, her smile, the way they walked out together. It all felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unravel. Except it wasn't someone else. It was mine. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself forever. I had to confront her, but I needed more. More proof. More answers. If I went to her now, she'd deny it. She'd brush it off as a misunderstanding, just like she always did. No, I needed to be sure. That night, as Elena slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Who had sent those videos? Why now? And how much more was there to uncover? I didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. I couldn't ignore this any longer. Whatever was happening, whatever Elena was hiding, I was going to find out. The next morning, Elena left for work early, her usual rush of heels clicking on the tile, and a hurried goodbye tossed over her shoulder. I sat in the quiet of our kitchen, sipping cold coffee and staring at the blank wall across from me. The weight of last night's videos pressed down on me like a lead blanket. It was time to stop wondering and start finding answers. I decided to start small. I pulled out my phone and searched her social media profiles. Elena wasn't much of a poster, just the occasional photo of us at family gatherings or vacations. But as I scrolled through her tagged photos, I noticed a few recent pictures from work events. In one of them, she was standing with a group of colleagues at a holiday party. And there he was, the man from the video, standing beside her. His name was tagged Alex Carter. I clicked on his profile, and sure enough, he worked at Elena's firm. He was a senior manager in her department. My stomach churned as I scrolled through his posts, photos of office outings, motivational quotes, gym selfies. There was nothing incriminating, but just seeing his face made my skin crawl. I closed the app and leaned back in my chair, trying to think clearly. If Alex was her coworker, then maybe all of this really was innocent. Maybe the videos were taken out of context, and I was jumping to conclusions. But then I remembered the way she'd smiled at him, the way she'd walked out of that bar with him. No, this wasn't innocent. I needed more. Later that day, I called my best friend Nathan. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey man," he said. "What's up? Can we meet up? I need to talk." "Yeah, sure. Everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "I'll explain when I see you." An hour later, we were sitting at our usual spot, a small diner on the edge of town. The smell of fried food and coffee filled the air as I laid it all out for him. The videos, the texts, the lies. Nathan listened quietly, his brow furrowed in concern. "So, what are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know," I said, running a hand through my hair. "I feel like I need more proof before I confront her. Otherwise, she'll just deny it." Nathan nodded. "Yeah, I get that. But be careful, man. You don't want to go down a rabbit hole and drive yourself crazy." "Too late for that," I muttered. He gave me a sympathetic look. "You know, if this guy works with her, you could ask around. Maybe someone else has noticed something." It was a good idea, but it felt risky. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do something, anything, to get to the bottom of this. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to Elena's behavior. Every time her phone buzzed, my ears perked up. Every time she mentioned work, I asked casual, probing questions. But she was good at keeping up appearances. If there was guilt, she didn't show it. Then one evening, an opportunity presented itself. Elena had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she went to take a call. My heart pounded as I walked over to it. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened her email. Most of it was work-related, just as I expected. But then I saw a folder labeled personal. My hands trembled as I clicked on it. Inside were a few emails from Alex, short, friendly messages about work projects. But one stood out. It was titled "Last Night." I clicked on it, my breath catching in my throat. "Elena, last night was amazing. I know we said we'd keep things professional, but I can't stop thinking about you. Let's talk soon. Alex." My stomach dropped. There it was in black and white. No more excuses, no more doubts. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was real. I closed the laptop just as Elena walked back into the kitchen. She smiled at me, completely unaware of what I'd just found. "Hey," she said, pouring herself a glass of water. "What are you up to?" "Nothing," I said, my voice tight. "Just checking my phone?" She nodded, taking a sip of water before heading upstairs. I stood there for a moment, staring after her, my mind racing. I felt like a stranger in my own home, like everything I thought I knew about my life had been flipped upside down. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the email over and over in my mind. The words felt like knives, cutting deeper every time I thought about them. By morning, I made up my mind. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I needed to confront her. But I wasn't going to do it empty-handed. If she was going to lie, I wanted to be ready. I pulled out my phone and replied to the unknown number. "If you have anything else, send it." A few minutes later, another video arrived. This one was taken in a parking lot. It showed Elena and Alex standing by her car. He leaned in to kiss her, and she didn't pull away. That was it. I had everything I needed. Elena had crossed the line, and now it was my turn. The next evening, I waited for Elena to come home. My chest felt tight, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times, but the words still felt like they would fall apart the second I opened my mouth. The videos, the email, the lies, they were all evidence I couldn't ignore. I had to confront her, even if it meant tearing our lives apart. When her car pulled into the driveway, I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter. She came in, her usual calm demeanor intact. "Hey," she said, setting her keys down. "What's for dinner?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at her, trying to see if there was any sign of guilt, any crack in her facade. "We need to talk," I said finally, my voice colder than I intended. Her brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Without a word, I tapped the screen and played the video, the one of her and Alex in the parking lot. The sound of their muffled voices and the image of his lips on hers filled the silence between us. Elena's face went pale. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. "I can explain." "Explain?" I said, my voice rising. "Explain what, Elena? That you've been lying to me? That you've been sneaking around behind my back?" "It's not what it looks like," she said quickly, stepping toward me. "I swear it's not." "Don't insult my intelligence," I snapped, taking a step back. "I saw the videos. I read the email. I know everything." Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for the right words, but nothing came out. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. "I didn't mean for this to happen." My stomach churned. Didn't mean for what to happen? The late nights? The secret messages? The affair? "It wasn't an affair," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "It was just, I don't know. I was confused. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. "Kissing him in a parking lot wasn't a mistake, Elena. Sneaking around with him wasn't a mistake. You don't just accidentally betray your husband." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as she started to cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Her tears didn't soften me. If anything, they only made me angrier. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded. She hesitated, her hands trembling. "A few months," she admitted. "It started with work dinners and meetings. We got close, and it just happened." I let out a bitter laugh. "It just happened? That's the best you can come up with." "I didn't plan this," she cried. "I didn't want this. I love you, Daniel. I do. I felt like we were drifting apart." "Drifting apart?" My voice cracked. "And your solution was to run into the arms of someone else? To destroy everything we've built together?" "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice breaking. "I felt lonely. I felt invisible." "Invisible," I said, my anger boiling over. "I've been here, Elena. I've always been here. But you." My voice faltered, and I looked away, trying to collect myself. "You threw it all away." She reached for me, her hands trembling. "Daniel, please. I made a mistake, but I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll end it. I'll quit my job. Just please don't give up on us." I stared at her, my chest heavy with a mix of anger, pain, and something I couldn't quite name. I wanted to believe her, to believe that she could undo the damage she'd caused. But the images of her with Alex, the lies she'd told, it was all too fresh, too raw. "I don't know if I can do this," I said quietly. Her face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave me." The room fell into a suffocating silence, her sobs the only sound. I wanted to feel something other than anger, compassion, forgiveness, anything, but I couldn't. All I could feel was the weight of her betrayal, pressing down on me like 1,000 bricks. "I need time," I said finally. "I need to think." She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Take all the time you need," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I didn't respond. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her there, broken and crying. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, closing the door behind me. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel at home in my own house. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I thought about all the years we'd spent together. The laughter, the fights, the promises we'd made. I thought about the life we'd built and the cracks that had begun to show. And I wondered if it was possible to fix something that felt so completely shattered. The next few days felt like walking through a fog. I went to work, sat through meetings, and answered emails, but my mind was somewhere else. Every moment alone was consumed by questions I couldn't answer. How had we gotten here? Had I missed the warning signs? Could I have done something, anything, to stop this from happening? Elena stayed out of my way, almost as if she knew any interaction would be too much for me to handle. She worked from home, which felt like a cruel twist of fate, forcing us into the same space while I tried to figure out what to do next. Each evening, we'd sit in awkward silence, the air between us thick with things neither of us dared to say. I spent most of my nights on the couch. I told myself it was because I needed space, but the truth was I couldn't bring myself to lie next to her. The bed we'd shared for years now felt foreign, a place where trust had been broken beyond repair. On the third night, Nathan called. "Hey," he said. "Just checking in. How are you holding up?" I hesitated. "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel numb, like I'm stuck in some nightmare I can't wake up from." "That's normal," he said. "Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you need to figure out what you want. Do you think you can forgive her?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Forgiveness. It seemed like such a simple word, but it carried so much weight. Could I really look past what she'd done? Could I ever trust her again? "I don't know," I said. "Every time I think about her and Alex, I feel like I'm suffocating." Nathan was silent for a moment. "Then maybe the question isn't whether you can forgive her," he said. "Maybe it's whether you want to." The line went quiet after that, his words lingering in the air long after we hung up. That night, I decided to clear my head. I grabbed my keys and went for a drive, letting the quiet hum of the engine drown out my thoughts. The streets were empty, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows as I drove aimlessly through the city. Eventually, I found myself at the park where Elena and I used to go when we first started dating. It was late, and the place was deserted, but the memories came rushing back all the same. I sat on one of the old wooden benches, staring at the empty playground. This was where I'd told her I loved her for the first time, where we'd planned our future, dreaming about a life filled with laughter and love. It felt like a different lifetime now, like those two people had been swept away by a storm they never saw coming. I pulled out my phone and opened the videos again, watching as Alex leaned in to kiss her, as she didn't pull away. The pain hit me all over again, sharp and unrelenting. But this time, it wasn't just anger. It was grief, for the life we'd built, for the person I thought she was, for the future I wasn't sure we'd ever have now. When I got home, it was past midnight. The house was dark except for a faint glow coming from the living room. I found Elena there, sitting on the couch with her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes puffy and red from crying. "I didn't think you were coming back," she said softly. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. Finally, I sat down across from her, keeping my distance. "We need to talk." She nodded, her hands trembling as she wiped at her eyes. "I know." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Why, Elena? Why did you do it?" She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "I don't know," she said after a long pause. "I guess I felt like we'd lost something, like we were just going through the motions. And Alex, he made me feel noticed again, like I mattered." Her words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. "And I didn't make you feel that way?" "It's not that," she said quickly. "You've always been amazing, Daniel. But somewhere along the way, I think I forgot how to be the person you fell in love with. And instead of fixing things with you, I made the worst mistake of my life." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how selfish and cruel her actions had been. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the woman I'd spent so many years loving and wondering if I even recognized her anymore. "Do you love him?" I asked quietly. "No," she said firmly, tears streaming down her face. "I never loved him. It was a stupid, meaningless distraction. But I love you, Daniel. I've always loved you." I didn't know if I believed her. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this, like a knife in your chest, like the ground crumbling beneath your feet. "I need time," I said finally. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Elena. but I need to figure out if I even want to try. She nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Take all the time you need, she whispered. I got up and walked toward the stairs, leaving her alone in the dark. As I climbed into bed, I realized Nathan was right. The question wasn't whether I could forgive her. It was whether I wanted to, and I still didn't have the answer. The days stretched into weeks. Elena tried to make amends in every way she could think of. She quit her job, cutting all ties with Alex. She cooked dinner every night, cleaned the house obsessively, and left little notes on the counter apologizing or reminding me how much she loved me. It was like she was trying to rewind the clock, to erase what had happened, but nothing she did could fix the crack that had split us apart. I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to talk, let alone forgive. Every time I looked at her, the image of her with Alex resurfaced, sharp and vivid. It didn't matter how many times she said she was sorry or how genuine her tears seemed. The betrayal lingered like a shadow over everything. One night, I found myself sitting in the garage, staring at the wall of tools I'd barely touched since this all began. The garage used to be my escape, a place where I'd tinker with projects or just clear my head. Now it felt like another reminder of how lost I'd become. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the messages Nathan had been sending me. He checked in regularly, offering support and advice, but I hadn't replied in days. I wasn't sure what to say. He kept telling me to think about what I wanted, but I still didn't know. Did I want to save this marriage? Or did I want to walk away? The sound of the garage door creaking open startled me. I turned to see Elena standing in the doorway, her face pale and hesitant. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said softly. I sighed, setting my phone down. What do you need, Elena? She hesitated, wringing her hands. I wanted to talk. If that's okay. I didn't respond, but I didn't tell her to leave either. She took that as permission and stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, she began, her voice trembling. But I need you to know that I'm not giving up on us. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. And why is that, Elena? Because you're sorry? Because you got caught. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. Because I love you, she said. I know I've destroyed your trust, and I know it might take years to rebuild it if it's even possible. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I just need to know if there's any part of you that still wants to try. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to believe her, to believe that she meant what she said. But love wasn't enough to erase what she'd done. I don't know if I can, I said finally. Every time I look at you, all I see is him. All I feel is the betrayal. She nodded, her tears spilling over. I understand, she whispered. And if you decide you can't forgive me, I won't fight you. I'll let you go. But I need you to know that this wasn't because of anything you did. You've always been more than enough, Daniel. I was the one who lost my way. Her words hit something deep inside me, stirring emotions I wasn't ready to confront. I looked away, unable to meet her eyes. I need more time, I said. I can't make this decision right now. Take all the time you need, she said, her voice breaking. I'll wait as long as it takes. She turned and left the garage, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of everything. The next day, I decided to seek advice from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my older brother Mark. We drifted apart after he moved out of state, but if anyone could give me honest advice, it was him. I called him that afternoon, and he picked up on the second ring. Daniel, he said, his voice warm. It's been a while. Everything okay? Not really, I admitted. I need your advice. Of course, he said. What's going on? I hesitated, then told him everything. The videos, the emails, the confrontation, and the aftermath. By the time I finished, I felt like I'd poured out every emotion I'd been bottling up for weeks. Mark was quiet for a moment before speaking. Look, Daniel, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. What Elena did was horrible, and you have every right to walk away. But if there's even a part of you that thinks this marriage is worth saving, you owe it to yourself to explore that. And if it's not, I asked, then you let her go, he said simply. But either way, you need to make a decision. Living in limbo like this isn't fair to either of you. His words stayed with me long after we hung up. That night, as I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, I realized he was right. I couldn't keep living like this, caught between anger and indecision. It was time to make a choice. The next morning, I sat down with Elena at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she hadn't slept all night. "I've made a decision," I said, my voice steady. Her breath caught, and she nodded, bracing herself. "Okay, I'm willing to try," I said. "But on my terms. You have to rebuild my trust, and it won't be easy. And if I ever feel like you're not fully committed to this, it's over." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for giving us a chance." As we sat there, the weight of the past weeks began to lift, just a little. I didn't know if we'd make it, but for the first time, I felt like we had a chance. And for now, that was enough. The days following my decision to give Elena a chance were anything but smooth. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I hadn't fully grasped just how much work it would take to even begin repairing what we'd lost. Trust wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. It wasn't something you could force. And despite Elena's promises and efforts, the doubt still lingered, like a constant shadow over our every interaction. True to her word, Elena committed herself to change. She started seeing a therapist, something she'd never done before, and suggested we go to couples counseling. At first, I was hesitant. Sitting in a room with a stranger, laying bare the raw wounds of our marriage, felt daunting. But after our first session, I realized it wasn't just about airing grievances. It was about figuring out if we could still build something worth saving. Our counselor, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Morgan, didn't sugarcoat anything. "This is going to hurt," she said during our first session. "Rebuilding trust after infidelity is like rehabbing a shattered bone. You have to reset it, which means going through the pain all over again before it can truly heal." She wasn't wrong. Every session forced us to confront the truths we'd been avoiding. I told Elena how betrayed I felt, how her actions had made me question everything about myself. She told me about the loneliness that had crept into her heart, the feelings of inadequacy and distance she hadn't known how to fix. We didn't walk out of those sessions feeling better. We walked out feeling exposed, but we also walked out knowing we were starting to talk about the things that mattered. At home, things were still tense. The evenings we used to spend watching movies or cooking dinner together were now filled with cautious conversations and awkward silences. But there were small moments, tiny cracks of light breaking through the darkness. One night, as we sat on the couch, Elena reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. It was the first time in weeks we'd shared any kind of physical connection, and though it felt tentative, it was something. I'd like to say I woke up one day and felt everything click back into place, but life doesn't work like that. Healing was a slow, grueling process. Some days, I thought we might actually make it. Other days, I wasn't so sure. One evening, I was cleaning out the garage when I stumbled across an old photo album. It was from our early years together, filled with pictures of road trips, beach vacations, and lazy Sunday mornings. There was one photo of Elena, sitting on a picnic blanket, her head tilted back in laughter as the sun lit up her face. I stared at it for a long time, remembering the joy we'd shared, the person she used to be, and the person I used to be with her. Later that night, I showed her the album. Her eyes widened when she saw it, and a soft smile tugged at her lips. "I haven't seen this in years," she said, flipping through the pages. "We were happy then," I said quietly. She looked up at me, her expression serious. "We can be happy again," she said. "I know it won't be the same, but we can find something new. If you're willing to try, so am I." I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. "I am," I said finally, "but I need you to keep showing me you mean it." "I will," she promised. Every day. The weeks turned into months. Little by little, we began to rebuild the life we'd almost lost. Elena was true to her word. She cut off all contact with Alex, even going so far as to change her phone number. She threw herself into therapy and counseling, confronting the parts of herself she'd tried to ignore for so long. I wasn't perfect either. I had to learn how to let go of the anger, how to trust her again, even when every instinct told me to guard my heart. There were setbacks, of course. I catch myself overthinking whenever she got a text or a phone call. She'd bristle at my questions, even though she understood why I was asking. But we kept talking, kept working, and slowly, the walls between us began to come down. One night, as we sat on the back porch watching the sun set, Elena turned to me and said, "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For giving me another chance," she said. "For believing in us, even when I didn't deserve it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. She wasn't perfect, and neither was I. But maybe that was okay. Maybe perfection was never the goal. Maybe it was enough to keep trying, to keep choosing each other, even when it was hard. "We've still got a long way to go," I said. "I know," she replied. "But we'll get there. Together." And for the first time in months, I believed her. The road ahead wasn't clear, and the scars of what we'd been through would never fully fade. But as we sat there, hand in hand, I realized something important. We were still here, still standing. And for now, that was enough.